Anthurium flower painting tutorial with super shiny flower surface. Let's go! Outline drawing is done, which is available for download, and with an elastic eraser removing excess amount of graphite off the paper. Mixing watercolors. I will be using Sennelier Red, clean Sennelier Red, also clean permanent rose, small amount, not too much, Perlin Maroon, clean pigment of Perlin Maroon, also Perlin Violet for some more contrasty shadow areas, a little bit more of Sennelier Red. This is like the majority of tutorial will be done with Sennelier Red, and Manganese Violet, just a little bit. Using round synthetic brush, I apply water to flower surface, and be sure that your water is clean after mixing watercolors. We need clean water on the flower base, especially where the shiny light area is. And starting with Sennelier Red on the darker side of the flower. Applying transparently, lightly, not too saturated, not too dark. We will be painting in many layers. This is just the first layer, starting with base. And this right side of the flower is all covered in red. We don't have shiny spots. Only this little area on the lower part of flower edge, and I'm leaving a little long gap, carefully painting around it. We have it in outline. This little edge of shiny part is important, and I'm leaving it unpainted, so carefully with brush going around it. You can use finer tip brush for greater precision around this really small area of shine. And in this case, as this is a shiny area, very exact area, I'm not leaving wider part as we usually do for the lighter parts. I'm just leaving this gap and carefully painting around spadix. I'm leaving it unpainted without any masking fluid. And also careful with outer edges. Don't need to go over the edges. Be very careful how are you painting. While the surface is moist, I can evenly spread watercolor layer across all this right side of the flower. And water amount on the paper should be just enough so you are moving with the brush your watercolors, not watercolors are floating by themselves, but we are moving with the brush. Adding a little bit of Perlin Maroon to Sennelier Red, and while the surface is still a little bit moist, I'm applying transparent amount of shadow area on the right side in the middle of flower head. We can clearly see that the lower part is lighter than in the middle. There is shadow area from spadix, and because this flower is curved and going away from light source, so all this right side we will be managing tonal values to create darker area, but very gradually. We don't want to make some really drastic shadow areas here, but that will come with layers, patiently and slowly. Now going to the left side, this is the tricky part. Maybe it seems from the reference, but you just need to know how to paint this shiny area, and it's not so difficult at all. You just need to look at those spots that you see clearly are red. Don't look at the light parts, don't look at some spots, just look at the red spots on this left side. And you will start to see that there are a lot of quite dark red area, but we will also build those darkness and contrast gradually. This is a first layer, super transparent. Also, it's important to have all the outlines of all these sections that we see in the reference. I have them, as you can see, and I start from the lower part using finer tip brush because here these areas are smaller. Smoothing applied watercolor layer and carefully studying reference all the time. Loading my brush with Sennelier red, and here I'm going straight on a dry surface. Every time before painting I pause a little bit because I'm also looking at the reference as I'm painting. No matter how long I will be painting, I will constantly study reference. Washing my brush, cleaning in paper towel and smoothing applied little areas. Moving forward to next section, leaving little gaps, some lighter spots, but you are looking only at the red spots. Don't look at the light part, don't think that it's shiny or don't think of anything. Just look at red spots. And as you will add more and more of little spots, it will eventually look like it's shiny because you are building contrast between those red spots, which are quite bright and dark, and that area that we are leaving unpainted, which is completely white as paper. Carefully painting, managing edges, taking a little bit darker Perlin Maroon with Sennelier red, and I'm outlining the edge of this Anthurium flower head. I all the time say don't outline with dark lines unless it is stated in reference, and in this case, this reference, this flower has in some areas really crisp and dark edge line. And here we are applying that because we see that in reference. Now the right side is completely dry and we can add another layer. As you can see, after a layer dried, it's really light. That's how light you should be painting. Not dark, not even after a few layers. It shouldn't look like reference. We are building layers gradually and only at the end it will be closer to reference. Also here I'm adding little spots here and there of darker sections that we see in reference. On the left side they are more vivid, but on the right side, if you take a closer look at the reference, you will start to see that there are also darker spots. And here I'm adding them, mixing Perlin Maroon together with Sennelier Red. Perlin Violet will be used only closer to the end because it's super dark and you need to be really careful with that pigment. Beautiful lines, veins of this flower head. Really thin, painting with the very tip of my brush. Using round synthetic brush for more wider brush strokes, especially on the right side, using Sennelier Red, transparent amount, next layer, even painting over those darker spots. As we are painting transparently, we are not completely covering layer underneath. We are adding transparent layer. Watercolors are a transparent medium and all layers are combining and creating rich finished look. If you will be painting with saturated, really dark watercolors, then you will be blocking previous layer and there's no need in layering and your painting can look flat with few super dark layers. Now I will add ultramarine blue to my watercolor palette together with a little touch of manganese violet, ultramarine blue with manganese violet, and you need to be really thin and light. Dilute it with water until you have a really light watercolor mix, and that we are adding in some areas of the shiny part. If you carefully look in the reference, you can pause the video, zoom in closer, and see in that shiny part there's not just red spots and white shiny spots. There are also some blues and violets and also pinks. We will add pink a little bit later. Now more of ultramarine blue together with manganese violet. Also, just in some areas, we are not painting everything with this color, leaving the lightest part white as it is paper, leaving area for more of red color just in some areas. When we are adding some new color, we are not overpainting everything. And adding more red spots using finer tip brush, looking at reference. I'm pausing because I'm looking, I'm studying reference for new insights, for new details, for some new spots, and I find them. The more I look, the more I start to notice, and I can add that to my painting. My reference is my main source of information for any painting. Taking round synthetic brush, transparent amount of watercolors, and adding another layer on a dry surface, making this watercolor transparent wash of Sennelier red and a little bit of Perlin maroon. Next layer, making it more vibrant, a little bit darker with each new layer. Here we have this beautiful back of flower head, and we want to make it right. Don't rush this little corner. Maybe it looks not so important, but no, everything in this composition is important, even the smallest part. And if you zoom in closer reference, you will notice that even in that darker part, there are slightly lighter areas where those little bumps of each of these curvy section, there are slightly lighter parts. Adding darkness to this edge so that we make it look thicker, not just a crisp line of darkness, but a little bit darker area, and smoothing it so it looks that this flower has a thickness. And a little bit darkness just underneath of the spadix. Carefully painting around it with the very tip of your brush, leaving it for later. And adding more watercolors, a little bit darker Perlin maroon with a little touch of Sennelier red, and building contrast on the left side where we have a shiny part. And these red spots are way darker than we have them right now, but patiently with layers we will get there. Perlin Violet here, loading brush and edge. We see in the reference that there's a crisp dark line around, but it's not evenly everywhere. It's somewhere more visible and somewhere it's not even visible at all, and then it comes visible again. So these little details, these little nuances are really important to make something look natural and realistic. Painting further, and as I look more to my reference, I notice that I have white areas wider and I need to cover them with watercolors, but everything is done gradually because in the reference we see that those areas are slightly lighter than the darker red area, and that is done with layers. We can't go straight with darker watercolors and get something look realistic. Adding more watercolors, more spots, carefully studying reference, that is the key. Next layer of watery wash with round synthetic brush. on the right side of flower head. Adding Sennelier Red and Perlin Maroon to my mixing palette. Don't add too much pigment, you can always add more. And continuing with building saturation layers to this Anthurium flower. adding finer details to left side and making that white lines, spaces between red spots more thinner with some details, with some crispy lines that we see in the reference. And the more we are narrowing down that white spots, white area, the more shinier this area starts to look. It didn't happen in the first layer, it didn't happen in the third layer, only now it starts to look that there's some shine. It's because we are building contrast, greater contrast between shiny white area and red color of Anthurium. Now using round synthetic brush and really transparent amount of permanent rose, I'm laying glazing on some parts of the white spots, of the white area. And it's important that the amount of watercolor is super light. We are not overpainting, we are giving a glaze, a shiny pink glaze to some parts of the shiny part. Not everything, because there are some areas that are completely white. Now round synthetic brush on a dry surface on the right side, we are adding another layer of shadow. Gradually, carefully, we are also here building saturation and darkness. For the spadix, I'm taking lemon yellow, separately a little bit on the second mix, adding little touch of perlin green, just a little tiny touch to make this lemon yellow calmer. Separately sap green with a little touch of lemon yellow. Starting with water, super small amount of water to the whole surface of spadix, and watercolor mix of lemon yellow with a little touch of perlin green. Carefully with outer edges, don't go into the red area. Taking sap green, and the upper part of the spadix is more greener than the lower part. Adding a little bit of red from flower mixes and adding that red to lemon yellow with perlin green. That is the shadow color. Surface of spadix is still a little bit wet. Everything is transparent, and I'm adding shadow on the right side because there is the shadow area. Be extra careful with outer edges. If you will start to add too much brush strokes there, add pigment there, then the outer edges of spadix will start to smooth, but we don't want that. We need exact details of spadix and don't touch flower around it. Adding perlin green to sap green mix and also lemon yellow. Carefully building shadow area. Don't rush these sections that are smaller. They ask for greater precision and your patience and your time. Don't rush things here. I know we are very close to finish and we want to finish this flower faster. If you feel that, you better pause tutorial and your painting, go for a walk, maybe come back another day or have a break for half an hour, drink a cup of tea and come back relaxed. This flower needs your attention for the spadix and for the stem. Let's take a closer look how I'm painting around each that little dot. I'm using lemon yellow with a little touch of perlin green, and I added some mix of sap green and some little bit of red watercolor mix from flower painting. It's very light brown and between green. And each this little dot on spadix has a little bit of shadow, cast shadow area on the right. So I'm painting with the very tip of my brush, surface underneath is dry, and I'm carefully painting that. No rush here. It's better to do it more slower and accurately rather than rush things. For the stem, I have yellows from painting spadix. I'm taking lemon yellow with sap green and some perlin maroon from flower painting. A little bit more, especially upper part of the stem is more green but with some red color tones in there. And start lightly, super lightly. Stem requires your attention as much as you do for the flower. Please take your time and accuracy for stem painting. Don't rush, be careful with outer edges, don't make it thick. Accurately study reference. Shadow is on the right. I waited a few moments for stem area to get dry, and now with the finest brush I'm adding lots of fine lines, especially on the right side of the stem. There is shadow and we are building shadow gradually. I'm adding a lot of fine lines. And I'm using watercolor mix of lemon yellow, sap green and perlin maroon, and also sap green with perlin green. These lines should be very light. We are gradually building darkness and saturation on the right side, leaving left side of the stem much lighter. As I painted stem, I noticed that this area needs more crisper edge. Be sure that the stem is dry at this moment when you are adding crisper line on the flower edge, so it's not getting blurry on the stem area. We need crispness here to separate flower from stem. And in this case, not stem is darker, but flower edge is darker than the stem. Let's zoom out, take a look at the whole composition. It's almost finished. We have all areas painted. Now is the time that we are comparing to the reference to all sections that we have on our painting, and we can decide how far do we want to push ourselves to paint this flower. We still can make it darker, we still can add details. This is your choice. How much do you want to put effort into this painting? For hyper-realistic result, we still need to go way longer. If you are already happy with your result, it's great. It's already looking realistic, shiny, all details are in places, shadows, tonal values, everything is already there. I'm already happy with my result, just adding some darker shadow area, some more contrasty red spots on the shiny part, maybe some pink watery washes, but I'm finishing up. I'm really happy with the result. I really enjoyed this tutorial and painting this Anthurium flower. Hope you learned something new and thank you for painting with me. See you in my next tutorials. Bye bye.